Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Preparing the way. Preparing the way. Okay, I think it might have been last Easter. Is this not? Okay. A little closer. Last Easter. Actually, I think it was more recent that I shared this story, but it goes with today's talk. So it was Palm Sunday, and the family's young son, Johnny, woke up in a really, really bad mood, and he just didn't want to go to church. Remember the story? He whined and complained about it so much that the parents finally said, "Okay, you don't have to go today." When the rest of the family returned home carrying palm branches, the little boy asked what they were for. His mother explained, "People put them on the ground as Jesus came by." "Wouldn't you know it," the boy fumed. "The one Sunday I don't go to church and Jesus shows up." I think the moral here is that you never know what you might be missing if you're not here at church, right? And I'd like to think that it's always something good. And I don't know if Jesus will show up today, but I do know that we are looking to show up every day with what we call Christ consciousness, a way of thinking, feeling, acting, speaking that is grounded in source with a capital S rather than ruled by conditions. And every moment of every day, we are at a decision point of whether we're going to show up in that way or not. Just like little Johnny in our story made the decision, and that decision had its consequences or results. Every moment, we are at a decision point, and the decisions we make in that moment affect the next moment, and the next, and the next. We're exploring this month, making the moment-by-moment decision to come from condition or come from source. Condition or source, condition or source, condition or source. Which will it be? And just to make sure we're all on the same page, condition-based decisions are outer directed. We are reacting to, responding to, living from what is going on out there, believing that our conditions define who we are and what we are capable of achieving, believing that others are responsible for our experience. Source-based decisions are inner directed. We are living from a space of knowing that there is something far, 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 far greater than meets the eye in everything that is going on. Realizing that the very essence of life itself breathes us, that the power which creates allness from nothingness beats our hearts, that the creative source of all created us out of itself, and therefore lives at the center of us. Source-based living means knowing that the source of all is infinite and is infinitely creating through and as us. This month, we are taking a sacred walk into source-based living, and each week we are being renewed and resurrected in spirit together. Today, our theme is preparing the way for us to live like we are intended to live, from a source-based consciousness into our purpose. To help us do that, we're going to look at two decisions that Jesus made that prepared the way for his resurrection of consciousness. Now, I'm not going to talk as long as I normally do today because we have a very sacred and holy ceremony to engage in to bring these ideas home. And then after we finish with that, we'll have another song by our esteemed vocalist today, Mr. Rod Loomis. But we will explore each and look at the message they have for us to prepare the way for our spiritual renewal, and we might even say resurrection, into new levels of source-based consciousness. Before looking at Jesus' decisions, I have a question for you. How many of you can look back at your lives and see how your way was being prepared? You can see the circumstances that happened in your life that prepared you for where you are today. I certainly can. I can see how every job, every relationship, every big event in my life prepared me for my ministry. I can look at a lot of these events and see that this was what was preparing me for my path. I had absolutely no idea at the time, but it did. Can any of you relate to that? And I want you to know that right now, the events in your life, the nudging in your heart, even the conditions, they are also preparing you for the way preparing the way for you. And you can be sure of that. Maybe you don't even know what for. Because sometimes I think, wow, I don't know what I'm being groomed for here, but something great's coming. But all will be revealed. All will be revealed. So let's look now at what our brother, the Master Jesus, has to teach us. So we're going to talk about the first decision, and that was deciding to ride into Jerusalem. And here's how it reads in the Bible. Now, when they drew near Jerusalem, Jesus sent 2 disciples, saying to them, "Go into the village opposite you, and immediately you will find a donkey tied and a colt with her. Loose them and bring them to me." All this was done, that it might be fulfilled, which was spoken by the prophet, saying, "Tell the daughter of Zion, behold, your king is coming to you, lowly and sitting on a donkey, a colt, the foal of a donkey." So the disciples went and did as Jesus commanded them. They brought the donkey and the colt, laid their clothes on them, and set him on them. And a very great multitude spread their clothes on the road. Others cut down branches from the trees and spread them on the road. And that's Matthew. So here Jesus was. For 3 years, he's been walking the country sharing his ministry. He's preaching, he's healing, he's feeding the multitudes, he's going to weddings, he's turning water into wine, he's raising the dead, and he's really been pretty active. Kind of a busy guy. And he has gathered quite a little following. He knows that he has some really big fans, and he also knows that he's made a whole lot of influential people angry. So why in the world would he make the decision to waltz into Jerusalem, and not just to waltz into Jerusalem, but to ride into Jerusalem, when he knew that the Pharisees were not happy with him? When he knew that death to his physical body awaited him? He made the decision because he had more work to do, and it needed to be done there. When we read the story of Jesus' entry into Jerusalem, we can detect that Jesus had a definite purpose and a conviction about that purpose in his triumphant entry. He rode into the city with great authority, being hailed as a king by those around him. To show him honor and respect, people made a path for him out of palm branches, which had long been a symbol of victory. What message does Jesus' triumphant ride into Jerusalem have for us today? Well, a couple. First, it tells us that we must likewise have the same definiteness of purpose, a conviction of purpose. And each one of you has a purpose. You all know that, right? Yeah, each one of you has a purpose. Just as Jesus had a purpose in riding into Jerusalem, each one of you has a purpose. Sitting there, you may think you don't know what your purpose is, but really it's very simple and not something that needs to be figured out. Your purpose is something that God implanted in the center of your very being, and it cannot be erased. It cannot be lost. What we can do is lose sight of it, and oftentimes we do this quite well. We can temporarily forget it, even for a very long time. We can argue against it, and we can pretend that it isn't there. Yet because God has put it there, we cannot erase it. We cannot lose it. So what is this purpose? What is your purpose? Well, I believe we each actually have 2 purposes. One is common to all of us, and the other is unique to each of us. The one common to all of us is simple. It is to awaken to who and what you are in God, and who and what God is in you. And your second purpose, which is unique to you, is to share your unique gifts. To share your unique gifts. I love this Sufi story. There was a poet that went to see his doctor because he was quite ill, emotionally and physically. The poet said, "Doctor, I have all kinds of symptoms. I am unhappy and uncomfortable. My hair and my arms and my legs are as if tortured." The doctor said, "Is it not true that you have not yet given out your latest poetic composition?" "That is true," said the poet. "Very well," said the physician. "Be good enough to recite it to me now." He did so at the doctor's orders, and he recited it again and again. Then the doctor said, "Stand up. You are now cured. What you had inside had affected your outside. Now that it is released, you are well again." And the man left healed. We prepare the way for awakening to our purpose by having the conviction that we have a purpose in the first place. When Jesus entered Jerusalem, he was preparing the way to achieve his purpose. What do you suppose Jesus' ride into Jerusalem, or do you suppose Jesus' ride into Jerusalem was easy. Anybody think it was an easy ride? Although he rode into the city with great authority, being hailed as king by all of those around him, having people make a path for him out of palms and their clothing, it must have taken a good deal of courage, of internal strength, to be able to do that, because he knew what lay ahead of him. I think it must have taken some courage to ride rather than walk into Jerusalem, because, and I did not know this until I did some research, by riding into town, he was breaking the law. Did any of you know that?
I didn't know that.
Did you know that? I did not know that. One of over 600 religious laws of the time said that Jews who came into Jerusalem to observe Passover must walk into the city. I had no idea. And so Jesus defied that religious law when he chose to ride in. Perhaps he did this to fulfill a prophecy in the Old Testament, and that's what Matthew said in his writing. And none of the other gospel writers mentioned this. Or perhaps he did it to show some defiance to the old, worn-out ways. Whatever the reason, it had to have taken a lot of courage. And that's the second lesson that Jesus' ride in Jerusalem teaches us. Living with a conviction of purpose, which is, remember, to awaken to who we are in God and who God is in us, and to share our unique gifts, may just take a little courage. It may take a little courage. It doesn't get more source-based than that. Jesus showed courage of purpose when he rode into Jerusalem on the donkey. Is there a place in you, in the next upward spiral of your evolution, that is needing courage from you right now? Is there a place where you need a little courage? Can you identify that right here and right now, and tap into the courage that you are, and agree today to move forward with living more on the purpose? Think about that. So the second decision, deciding to chase the money changers out of the temple. The scripture says, "Then Jesus went into the temple of God and drove out all of those who bought and sold in the temple, and overturned the tables of the money changers and the seats of those who sold doves. And he said to them, 'It is written, my house shall be called a house of prayer, but you have made it a den of thieves.'" After riding into Jerusalem, he went into the temple and he cleaned house. He cleaned house. Before the next evolutionary step up, we must clean house a bit. And I do recommend Marie Kondo and her, joy of tidying up. It is really kind of a fun thing to do. But back to what I'm talking about, what the heck do you think is going on in our world right now on a bigger scale? On a bigger scale. This is a huge house cleaning on a bigger scale. That's what's happening right now. It looks like a lot of chaos, but I think things are getting stirred up so they can be cleaned up, so we can move ahead in our evolutionary process. So this event is such a wonderful metaphor for us to clean out our temples. What thieves do we have living in our consciousness that are robbing us of life as it is meant to be expressed? Are we storing in our temples the thieves named anger, guilt, resentment, negative self-image, thoughts of lack or limitation? And I can go on and on. Think about what those thoughts are that may be stealing our thought processes. We often spend so much time on external things, on making ourselves, our careers, our lives look bright and shiny on the outside, but inside we have a lot of junk that needs to be tossed out. This is a good time to do that. Spring cleaning, right? Jesus was point blank about this when he was condemning the Pharisees in Matthew. He said, "Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you cleanse the outside of the cup and dish, but inside they are full of extortion and self-indulgence." Blind Pharisee, first cleanse the inside of the cup and dish, that the outside of them may be clean also. This is buzzing at me. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not suggesting that we are full of extortion and self-indulgence, such as Jesus thought the Pharisees were, but his message of cleaning the inside so that the outside may be clean also is very, very relevant to us. And all of that stuff we have gunking up, now that's a spiritual technical term, gunking up, the inside keeps us in prison. We are like the man who was once falsely accused and convicted of a crime and sentenced to 20 years in prison. He escaped on the way to prison and fled into the mountains. For 9 years he lived and worked as a prospector in an isolated region, but it was in constant fear of being caught. So he lived as a hermit, and he was suspicious and fearful of everyone he met. His life was one continuous nightmare. He may not have been in prison, but he had, in fact, created his very own prison. One day the sheriff's deputies found the man, but rather than capturing him, like he expected them to do, they told him that he was free. They told him that they had been searching for him all of those years, to tell him that a few weeks after his escape, the guilty person had confessed to his crime. The man had been free all of those years, but he did not know it. He was literally imprisoned by his false beliefs. That reminds me also of the story of the person who was caught in one of those tractor-trailer trucks, and he thought that there was no air inside, and he suffocated, but there was air in there all along, but he believed that there was no air. It's time to clean house. It's time to get out of prison right now. I invite you right now to think of one thing you're carrying around with you that is really not serving your purpose. Is there one thing that is not serving your purpose? Do you have a habit in your life that is limiting you? Do you have an attitude that is standing in the way of your good? I ask you this morning to be willing to let it go. I ask you to commit right now to let it go. Remember that every decision we make sends us down a different path of experience. Can you make a decision this morning, and one that you will stick to clean out one limiting habit or belief that will cause you to go down a very different path of experience? Palm Sunday. This day really is a symbol of the possibility in us all to renew our lives when we properly prepare the way, and Jesus shows us how. We can prepare our way for our life's renewal by riding into our Jerusalem with a conviction of purpose. Our purpose is to awaken to who and what we are in God, and who God is in us, and to share our unique gifts with the world. And we can prepare our way for our life's renewal by clearing out our temple of limiting thoughts, attitudes, habits. What one limiting aspect of you are you willing to let go of right now? There was a certain man who planted a rose bush, and he watered it faithfully. And before it blossomed, he examined it. He saw that the bud that would soon blossom, and he looked at it and he marveled at its beauty and its aroma and the miracle of its unfoldment. But he also noticed the thorns, and he thought, how can any beautiful flower come from a plant burdened with so many sharp thorns? Saddened by this thought, he neglected to water the rose, and before it was able to bloom, it died. So it is with many of us. Within all of us, there is a rose. The godlike qualities planted in us at birth grow amid the thorns of our conditioned-based thinking. Many of us look outside ourselves or our world and see only the thorns, only the defects. We despair, thinking that nothing good can possibly come from us or from our lives. We're one person. What could we do? Through our condition-based thinking, we neglect to water and nurture life itself, and eventually something in us seems to wither away and die. But of course, it does not. It only goes dormant until we choose to water it with source-based thinking. And once we do, life is renewed and we are resurrected. So now we're going to move into our sacred rose blessing ceremony. The rose blessing symbolizes in ceremony our recognition that the human is immersed in the divine, that we are truly one in God, and that we live in the all-embracing circle of divine love. We recognize today that each one of you comes forth from God, that each one of you is a divine creation, and that this wholeness is the very being, the very life, the very essence of you. Truly, truly, you are made in God's image. This moment is a defining moment for each one of you. In this moment, you will publicly pledge to allow your Christ light to shine and to release your will to the will of the divine, living as you. Living as you. In this public moment, yet within the privacy of your own hearts, I invite you now to commit to yourself and to God that you will no longer allow fear, doubt, resentment, unforgiveness, or any other false beliefs or lack or limitation to control you. From this moment forward, I invite you to commit to allowing God to express itself more fully and freely through you than ever before by your choice to align yourself with the divine principles of peace, happiness, and abundance. Will you do this to the best of your ability? If so, say, I will.
I will.
In a moment, I will individually bless those who desire by dipping a rose in water. The water symbolizes the flow of life, the flow of clarity, and the flow of wisdom through you. The rose, always a symbol of love, today symbolizes the divine love that is always guiding you from within. So if you would, please come forward one at a time, and once you have been blessed, you may return to your seat. Is this going to be a little tricky? Okay. I bless you with a heart and a mind open wide to the divine. From this day forward, may you live from Source. I bless you with a heart and a mind open wide to the divine. From this day forward, may you live from Source. I bless you with a heart and a mind open wide to the divine. From this day forward, may you live from Source. I bless you with a heart and a mind open wide to the divine. From this day forward, may you live from Source. I bless you with a heart and a mind open wide to the divine. From this day forward, may you live from Source. Ed, I bless you with a heart and a mind open wide to the divine. From this day forward, may you live from Source.
Thank you.
I bless you with a heart and a mind open wide to the divine. From this day forward, may you live from Source. I bless you with a heart and a mind open wide to the divine. From this day forward, may you live from Source. I dipped it.
Oh.
I dipped it. You are blessed. Dear Rod, I bless you with a heart and a mind open wide to the divine. From this day forward, may you live from Source.
Okay, now Rod, you're up there. You bless Reverend Chris.
Oh, well, you can
There you
do one
go.
for me too.
I'll be happy to.
All right. You can dip it in the water.
Tip it in the water.
The holy water of
Holy
Modesto.
water of Modesto.
Okay. That's right here.
Reverend Chris,
Yes.
I bless you with a heart and a mind open wide to the divine. From this day forward, may you live from Source as you always do.
And so it is.
And so it
Thank you. Okay. Okay, so we've all been blessed. So may we all go forth and be a blessing to the world. And so it is.
is.